guys, I'm Spooky Little Fox, and today I will be making the janitor's room from Little Nightmares. I'm using a cardboard box for the room and cutting off the extra flaps. My partner made this wallpaper for me by tracing over the wallpaper in game, and here I'm cutting it into strips. Here I'm making the wallpaper look weathered by using a wash I made. I roughed up the sides using some scissors, but I forgot to record. And I'm just using some Mod Podge to glue them into the box. I made this extra panel off camera. This is how I made the little hidden door. And here I'm just gluing some wallpaper to it. Here I'm cutting around the door with an X-Acto knife. Making sure it fits. And for the floor I used some foam board. I used a ball stylus tool to add some detail to the foam board. Here's an up close so you can see what it looks like. And I used this ball of aluminum foil to add some texture to it. Here I'm painting it with some acrylic paint. And then dry brushing with a light gray. I made another panel for near the door in the bathroom. I'm just putting some wallpaper on it. And I added some wood trim to it and added these little teeny tiny nails to it just to give it more detail. Here I'm adding in the floorboards. I made these out of strips of basswood. Next, I'll be working on the door and stairs. I made these stairs off camera using some foam board and popsicle sticks. And here I'm just painting them a gray beige color and dry brushing them with a dark brown. Next, I'm making the door. I used balsa wood to make the door, as well as some basswood for the details. I made this eye using some polymer clay, but I accidentally burnt it, but it doesn't really matter since I'll be painting over it anyways. See? Looks great. I dry brushed over that with the same brown that I used for the stairs. And here I'm just gluing them in. And now I'm going to be starting on the furniture, starting with this shelf that I'm climbing on in this clip. First, I cut the ends of these popsicle sticks off, and I'm going to be using these for the sides of the shelf. I used this piece of Taco Bell box for the front of the shelf. Here I'm just gluing the popsicle sticks onto the sides. For the drawers, I used some thinner popsicle sticks and some foam board. I cut the foam board to different thicknesses to make it look like some of the drawers are sticking out more than others. I painted it a light brown. I secured the drawer handles using some super glue. These are just some little metal beads that I had, and I thought they would work really well for some handles. Oh god! I definitely need to be more quiet so I don't alert the janitor. And there we go, we got an eerily tall shelf. Okay, for the bathroom area, I made this cute little toilet out of some polymer clay, and I'm just painting it with an off-white. Then I painted the toilet seat with this brown gloss paint. And the sink, I painted the same off-white as the toilet. I made these pipes using some straws and paper. I decided to add a pull chain to the toilet because it felt like it was missing something. Here I'm just securing it on using an eye pin. There we go. Now the janitor can actually flush his toilet. Next, I'll be making this little shelf that's above the toilet where all the toilet paper and cleaning supplies are stored. I made this shelf using some balsa wood. I made these little toilet paper rolls out of some tubes I made from paper bags and some actual strips of toilet paper. I rolled them all up and secured it with a little bit of Mod Podge. And boom, got a little roll of toilet paper. For the plunger, I decided to use some buttons, and I found 3 buttons of various sizes. And I glued them all in a stack. For the handle, I used a small wooden dowel and glued that on top. I forgot to record myself making this little bucket, but here I am painting it a metallic color. I made this tiny crate using some popsicle sticks, and I put some fabric scraps inside. And I'm gluing everything on the shelf. And don't worry, I didn't forget the little statue on the shelf. I added that in later. And then gluing everything into the piece. These pipes I made out of some straw, but I'll show how to make those later on in the video. See, I added in the little statue. Next, I'll be working on the dresser, the key table, and the shelf that I'm standing on in this clip. For the top of the shelf, I used some pieces of popsicle stick. I made this shelf pretty similar to the other shelf. Popsicle sticks for the drawers. And then for the handles, I used these little glass beads. And then I realized halfway through that I needed to paint it before I put the handles on, so I went ahead and did that. And glued on the rest of the beads. For the bottom drawers, I decided to add these little round beads to the sides to add some variation. Oops! No! I definitely need to be more careful. I used way too much glue here, and I ended up burning my hands really bad and made a mess. Hold on, let me just... Ugh. Now for the key table, I used some balsa wood. I used this circle stencil to make the sides look clean. And then I sanded down the sides with a nail file. For the legs of the table, I used some toothpicks that I cut the tips off of, and I glued those on with Mod Podge. Painted the table a light brown. And for the cloth on the table, I used some fabric scrap. I made this tiny cardboard box out of a paper bag, and I used beads for the bottles. And of course, I can't forget the tiny key. Now for the big shelf. And surprise! It's made out of popsicle sticks. Here I'm making the bottom of the shelf where the legs will be attached. I made sure not to use too much hot glue this time. Here I'm adding some details to it. I ended up adding more books later on. Here I'm gluing them all in. And I just quickly made this little dresser thing. Glued the legs on. Painted it. I used the same little beads that I used for the first shelf and roughed it up with this brown marker to add some detail. And now for the folding bed. I made it using a Taco Bell box that I cut with an X-Acto knife, and then I made this makeshift hinge out of some wire. That way it's functional. Painted it gray and black. For the legs, I used some crafting wire, and I put beads on the ends to make it look more seamless. I made the mattress using some fabric and some foam board, and here I'm painting it a beige color. I used a darker color to add some depth. On the back of the mattress, I tried to make it look as indented as possible so it looks like an actual spring mattress. For the blanket, I used this blue fabric. I cut some leather strips for the straps. The little buckles I made out of some paper. I'm gluing them in. I made the pillow using the same method as the mattress. I'm cutting the excess off the straps here. For the switch, I used a little piece of the Taco Bell box and some crafting wire. I also added some tiny beads to look like screws or bolts. And I glued it onto the side of the bed. And it's functional. I'm really proud of how the bed turned out. Next, I'll be making some of the smaller details on the floor, like the rug, the suitcase, and the little jugs. For the rug, I used this piece of leather. I was hoping that it would maintain some of the texture, but that didn't work out. I drew on the pattern using a pencil. I know it's not completely accurate to the game, but I think it turned out nice. I made the suitcase out of polymer clay and a piece of crafting wire. And here I'm just painting on some details using some metallic paint. I also made these jars off camera using polymer clay. As well as this ball and the little pair of slippers. Next, I'm going to be working on the details higher up in the room, like the pipes and the shelves. I used some straws to make the pipes by cutting them and hot gluing them into the shape that I wanted. I used paper to look like metal bands, also to cover up any imperfections. I painted them black to cover up the bright colors, and then I painted them gray, making sure to leave some of the black to show detail. For the rope, I used some twine that I wrapped around the pipes. I made these little suitcases using polymer clay, and I glued them into a stack. I also made this little lantern. Oh god.
It's coming! No!
Anyways, I was gonna say, I made the lantern using various pieces of metal jewelry. And now for the shelf above the door. I was originally just gonna make a small shelf for this, but there was so much empty space. And so I made this really tall and precarious looking shelf to fill in some of that space. Painted it and roughed it up, and I filled it in using beads, some stuff I made with polymer clay, and other tiny objects. And there we go, a little trinket shelf. Next, I'll be making the pictures on this wall. For these, I used an old earring, some buttons, and scraps of wood to make the frames. I know the pictures aren't accurate to the game. I'm pretty sure they're from Little Nightmares too, but whatever. Now for the rest of the pictures in the room. And here I'm just gluing them all into place. And here I'll be installing the lighting. I made the lamp using a paper straw and some random pieces of plastic. Painted it black, and then I painted it with this bronze metallic paint. Here I'm feeding the lights through the box and then through the lamp. And then I used a little bead for the light bulbs. I did the same thing for the other lamps. And of course, can't forget to make Six herself. I made her using some polymer clay and wire for her tiny skeleton. A lot of you said I should make her climbing the drawers, so that's what I did. And since I'm too indecisive on where to put her, I didn't glue her in. That way I can put her here, here, or here. 6! No! Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and comment what miniatures you'd like to see me make in the future. You can also support me over on Patreon. Bye bye!